Hey, pack your bags, get ready for that full body screen at the airport. It's all about automation, and this is Gary Mintchell, and I've been on the road again. This last week I've been to the ODVA conference, or annual meeting actually, in Phoenix, Arizona. And it was a really good conference. They had a lot of people there. Uh, Adrian puts on a really good, a really well organized event, let's put it that way. And it met March 1, 2, 3. I didn't do very much on March 1st. Those were they weren't necessarily closed doors, but a lot of the special interest groups, or SIGs, met on Tuesday. And then Wednesday they kicked off with a couple of hour meeting in the morning where Rich Harwell, the CTO of the Association of ODVA, which, as you know, used to mean Open Device Net Vendors Association, and now it just means ODVA. And it incorporates the standards work of all of the CIP, Common Industrial Protocol networks. And that includes things like DeviceNet, ControlNet, Ethernet IP, and that's with a capital N and a /IP, and I'll never forgive him for that name. Anyway, Ethernet IP, and then add-ons like SIP Sync, SIP Safety, SIP Motion, and as they keep working on things, there's soon to be some energy usage coming along well. So anyway, that was all gathered together, and Rich Harwell is, from Eaton, is the CTO, Chief Technology Officer, and he basically led a review, an update to the body of all the special interest group work that's gone on since the last annual meeting, which actually happened 2 years ago. What happened is there was a meeting, and typically for ODVA, since it was founded in 1995, it tends to do something like a 18-month cycle, and they call it a term. And so there's a term. So this just finished the 14th term, but it's been about 16 years since they founded the association. So anyway, this is the completion of the 14th term. They were going to meet last year at Hanover, I think, but then remember last year in Hanover and the volcano and all that kind of thing. And so none of the Americans made it over to Hanover, which was actually kind of a good thing because they would have been stuck for a while given the volcano and the flights and that whole thing. So anyway, this was an update since then. And so a lot of things had gone on since then, and I'm actually still trying to work my new iPad into my workflow. So I'm just checking to see how it goes. I've made a few notes or outlines so I can keep track, and we'll see how that goes. So anyway, you kicked it off, and there's just been a heck of a lot of work done. One SIG on the architecture for Ethernet IP. Did about 63, I think 61, 63 updates or enhancements to the specification. A lot of enhancements to the specification. Harwell noted that since the last meeting, 2 new interest groups have been formed. One for energy, and it actually has started doing some work. And then the second one is on rail transport. Mostly in Europe, because over here in America we seem to not like rail. We seem to like to fund the car companies. So at any rate, no report on the rail one, but a little bit later in this report I'll talk more about energy. Lots of spec enhancements. I'm just going to name a couple that seem to fit really quickly. They're working on... let me give it a little background. CIRCOS, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for, basically a motion control specialized network, and mostly championed by Bosch Rexroth, but used by lots of people, of course. Anyway, there's a kind of a coming together, working together of CIRCOS and SIP networks, and they've actually been working on a way for a SIP network to recognize a CIRCOS device on the network. So some work going together with SIP and CIRCOS. Also, part of that whole deal has to do with the SIP safety networking. And what they're doing with that is also incorporating a lot of the safety that's been built into Surcos and making that part of SIP safety so that they work together. So a lot of working together of SIP networks and Surcos. And also talking about safety, they have added profiles of analog I/O devices to SIP safety. So now not only just discrete switching and so on, but also analog I/O as part of the safety network. Oh, and part of the SIP motion. They were mentioning that now they have had experience with SIP motion products out, and once you have those products out, now that you can start to see the actual what happens in the actual physical world. And so they've made a number of updates to that, and they are working on additional profiles to get volts per hertz, variable frequency drive kind of information into the SIP network, and additional motion control. So a lot going on there. At the end of the technical review board presentation, there was a presentation by Eddie Lee of Moxa and Paul Didier of Cisco Systems, who presented a paper on a white paper. His committee on security has met and is just issuing a white paper to the membership, and actually it goes to end users or implementers. And it's just a lot of best practices and ideas and suggestions for building a secure network. This paper is done by the committee, but it needs to be blessed by the technical review board, and is not quite done yet. Anyway, that was presented. The next, later that afternoon, following that, there were at least 13 sessions where people presented papers on various aspects that have to do with various ideas of SIP networks. I was one person, obviously I didn't sit in all of them, but I did sit in the one at the end on energy because I knew that was a big profile thing coming in, and they're working on energy optimization because manufacturing production, and manufacturing and production, those terms, is a huge consumer of energy, not only electric but other things. And so within the SIP networks, they're specifying objects that the data can be then moved easily over the SIP network. And the objects are supposed to be somewhat neutral as far as goes on in over any network, but of course they're worried about SIP networks, so they're working on that. They have a thing called an OEU, optimization for energy usage is what it's called, and that's part of what this committee and our special interest group will be working on, and they expect products in 2012. At the annual meeting, then on Thursday morning, Catherine Voss, the executive director, presented the work that they had been doing over the past 2 years. And the association as a whole, the whole organization, and this is worldwide, has conducted over 40 seminars and working groups to spread the word and teach and educate more about SIP networks. And also, and this includes North America, Western Europe, China, Japan, Korea, specifically that I remember. And in China, it's just a growing area right now. So in China, they actually did a webcast, and it was attended by 400 people, which is it's a pretty good webcast if you can get 400 people out to hang on and listen to what you have to say. Another announcement they made was they're making written spec updates twice a year. So they are now caught up with all the spec enhancements being published out to developers, so developers can be assured that they're developing to the latest standard. Also at the annual meeting, Bosch Rexroth was accepted as a principal member. It's kind of like the permanent members of the UN Security Council, I guess. So the principal members get a board seat. So the assembly was introduced to the board person from Bosch Rexroth. This is fairly significant because Bosch Rexroth, of course, does a lot in the realm of motion control and has been the big pusher for Surcos, and therefore you see all the Surcos interfacing going on. And it's got to be good for the industry when these kind of things work together. They like to do a couple of other things at these meetings, and one is get somebody who's implemented SIP networks, and they got Pete Anderla of Kimberly-Clark, and he's an IT guy, believe it or not, but he was talking about how in an overall IT manufacturing structure, they put together, they included Ethernet IP, and how easily it fits within their whole IT structure, so that getting, and with all the, and he discussed some of the appropriate firewalls and things you do, and rolling it out. He's more corporate, and so rolling it out plant to plant to plant, and what they've done there is it's a good success story for Ethernet IP, and it's also interesting that he was mentioning that he realizes that IT people have one point of view of things, and engineers have another point of view. And he said as they were able to roll out and work with engineers, they were able to come out with a system that integrated well enough and got the information that everybody needed, that now they're at the point where engineers realize they need this system to operate better. And that's a good thing. So I'm glad to see things like that going on. And this year is a little bit different for the final keynote. And I think they've done different things. I think Catherine said last year that, or 2 years ago, last meeting, that they had an economist because they were about in the depths of the downturn going on. And this year what they did was bring in a technology visionary. And his name was Flavio, well, his name still is, Flavio Bonomi. And he's from Cisco. He's a Cisco fellow and head of advanced architecture and research. And he spoke on the Internet of Things. And this is a topic I've followed for at least 10 years, I think, a long time. And we've been talking about it and talking about how the big explosion in the Internet will really happen when we have things talking to things in addition to people talking to people, people talking to things, things talking to people. It's the Internet of Things. And he discussed a lot of the underlying technologies that are happening and how convergence is coming. And having spent a day with ODVA and the all the engineers around there, is interested in how that all fits into what he's already been putting together on some of the other technologies. And let me mention like IP version 6, IPv6 you may have heard about. These things all run on IP addresses. That's the IP of TCP IP or UDP IP. And anyway, we're running out of those addresses. We only had it seemed like a huge number, but it's not enough if every device goes on the network. And so IPv6 expands exponentially the number of unique IP addresses. But this is going to take some new firmware and devices to be able to read and talk, or find their address in this. So it's a coming thing. People have been working on it, but just like everything humans do, we really don't get serious till we run out. And theoretically, they just issued the last block of IPv4 IP addresses just within the last month. So this is a coming thing. There's some low power. There's a project going on, and look up IETF if you want to know more. But there's another project called 6LoWPAN that I've followed off and on for quite a while, and I've talked to a couple of people in the industry about that, and written about it off and on that. A lot of things going on this connectivity, and how can we connect, and so on, and how can that make our machines better? How can we use this new Internet of Things technology to do things like get the machines run off, I forget the word I want right now, but it's it's when you build the machine and you take it and you run it off and do final acceptance. This should help that final acceptance, because one of the keys when you build buy and build a machine is the faster you get it running, the faster you make products, the faster you make profit. So speeding all that up is a good thing. Also, being able to get more information back and tapping into it, both for the engineer on the line, the maintenance people on the line, and the machine builders or integrators or other people that helped them, because now they can tap in, find that information, troubleshoot faster. We're all trying to get these machines more and more and more uptime, just more and more uptime. So it all fits in with this overall Internet of Things that Flavio was talking about, and a fascinating guy. I was glad to talk to him a couple times at some of the breaks. So that was the ODVA meeting. A lot of optimism. Things are looking up. Business is looking up. People are really charged about this network, and that's good. And so it's just good to see excitement again in the industry and see some things happening. And if you have any other thoughts, or if you happen to like one of the other networks and you want to ping me, that's okay. I'll report on you later at another networking, another one of my trips. So anyway, my bags are packed for a trip to California in a couple of weeks, and then I'll be at Hanover. I will be at the Automate show in Chicago, March 22nd. So if you're going to be there, ping me on Twitter or send me an email. Say, hey, I'm going to be there. Maybe we can have a tweet up at Starbucks or something during the Automate show. I'll be at Hanover. If you're going to Hanover, send me a note. Maybe we can meet up somehow there. And after that, I think the next bigger thing I'll be is the AVB user conference that comes up late April. And I'm planning on OTC in May. So there's a lot of places to go. So ping me if you want to meet, and we'll just chat and say hi or whatever. So anyway, this is Gary Mintchell, and I've been on the road again.